Hello. Welcome to COCOON's second video, explaining strangeness. In our first video, we presented a cosmological consciousness ontology, or COCOON, intended to answer these two questions. 1. Is there a framework that accommodates consciousness in a matter that is compatible with what is known scientifically, and what would such a framework look like? 2. Could this framework explain any of the high strangeness phenomena, such as UAPs or paranormal events that are currently considered to be outside mainstream science? If you haven't seen the first video, we highly recommend you do so before watching this one. The link is below in the description. If you are one of those people who prefer to skip to the end of a novel to find out who done it, we get it. Let us then summarize the COCOON model as follows. COCOON places consciousness at the center of a theory of everything, that includes information, quantum, and entropy, and it surmises that we exist in a biplanar universe with our traditional spacetime, as being an entropy-driven plane, and an information plane, ruled by information negentropy. Both planes interacting with each other via quantum entanglements between consciousnesses in the information plane and very small organs inside our neurons known as microtubules. Catalyzing the flow of information between both planes is one of the main roles for consciousness, with conscious entities residing in the information plane, but connecting to the brain via these microtubules. Think of the two planes as the two sides of a coin. Through the rest of this presentation we will be showing the information plane as a green ring encircling the material plane shown in a blue texture, or as a green layer bordering the material plane. Suffice to remember that the information plane is connected in all points to the material plane. Other than for quantum phenomena, which is deemed to be truly universal, entities in the information plane are not constrained by the laws of physics in the material plane, such as the speed of light, or gravity. The information plane of the universe itself is populated by a massive network of conscious agents. All conscious entities, shown as green spheres, exist in the information plane. Some are connected to the material world via microtubules, others may exist in a detached manner inside the information plane. Each conscious entity can be viewed as a standalone node in a network of entities. Direct communications through the information plane between conscious entities are also possible. The information plane in this case can be viewed as a non-local channel permitting instantaneous communications. COCOON posits that shared conscious observations establish an entanglement between the observing consciousnesses. The entanglement strength is referred to as correlated consciousness experiences, or CCX for short. The more shared experiences two conscious entities have, the more those two will be entangled, and the stronger their CCX index. The ease with which conscious entities can interact with each other depends on their degree of CCX entanglement. Interestingly, since these entanglements occur within the information plane, they are likely to outlast the detachment of the conscious entity from the material plane. Again, the more entanglements, the stronger the CCX, and the easier for the entangled entities to share their existence via the information plane. Conscious entities connected to the material plane via microtubules receive all physical organism experiences, coded as information that gets ultimately stored in the information plane. Conscious entities are also directing the response to those experienced through the microtubules, via free will decisions. A good analogy is to think of our material bodies as monitoring appliances such as the popular Ring device, the microtubules as home network routers, the conscious entity as the software controlling everything from the service provider's site, and the information plane as the cloud system storing the videos. Since the communications channel established between the conscious entity and the physical mind via microtubules is bidirectional, COCOON allows that, under the right conditions such as dream states, or altered mind states, communications from other conscious entities in the information plane can be propagated into the physical mind. Finally, since information gathered by a conscious entity is stored in the information plane, something akin to a tag or index is added to the storing entity's tag list. These tags can be seen as indexes used to access the conscious entity's exact memory of experiences stored in the information plane. With COCOON, the accumulated tag list can represent a universally unique identifier for each conscious entity, something we usually refer to as the soul. In this video, we will test the COCOON model against a range of so-called strange phenomena. Even though various anecdotal and not-so-anecdotal phenomena that so far has been labeled as metaphysical or paranormal has been viewed with wrinkled noses by mainstream science, reality is that, what constitutes metaphysics and the paranormal are more reflective of the limits of science that we care to admit. No doubt, thunder was viewed as a mystical phenomenon by our early ancestors. Remember Zeus throwing lightning from Mount Olympus? Astronomic events such as eclipses and comets were surely considered manifestations from magical influences. In the later part of the 18th century, reports of falling rocks from the sky were viewed by science with the same suspicion as reports of falling frogs and fish. When a physicist named Ernst Chladni suggested the rocks came from space, he was strongly rebuked. Today, no one says that meteorites are fake. The recent UAP videos from the US Navy and the declassification of remote viewing experiments by the CIA, among other things, have removed some of the stigma from at least being able to discuss this kind of phenomena. For sure, much of the strangeness literature, and paranormal claims out there, are absolutely bunkers by any standards. We have just witnessed the spectacle of hundreds of people stationed in Daley Plaza in Dallas, expecting John F. Kennedy Jr. to show up any moment now. And flat earthers are having a rebound. Some other claims are typically driven by cultural and political drivers, or by simple ignorance. Even though conspiracy claims such as that the COVID vaccine contained microchips or that it magnetized the body, or the insanity of QAnon are new, there are many other claims and events that keep reappearing not only because of fashion, but because they have a significant pedigree over centuries of human history. Attempting to debunk or study everything would be an impossible task, but the problem is that of all claims, there might be a small percentage truly deserving attention. The question is, which ones? If you are a skeptic with an open mind, we believe the following books deserve your consideration. An End to Upside-Down Thinking, Dispelling the Myth that the Brain Produces Consciousness, and the Implications for Everyday Life, by Mark Gober. This book presents a catalog of various scientific studies related to strange phenomena and their many intriguing findings. On the topic of strange phenomena overall, you may want to check Passport to Magonia, From Folklore to Flying Saucers, by Jacques Vallée. This book takes a historical view on so-called mythical experience throughout human history and how these experiences relate to currently defined strange phenomena. It should be noted that the author is a respected UFO researcher who served as a role model for the French scientist in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Most specifically on the subject of UAPs, the book, In Plain Sight, An Investigation into UFOs and Impossible Science, by reputable Australian journalist Ross Coulthart, presents a factual investigative journey of discovery on the subject. There are a couple recent serious books on the alleged events at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, which also provide narratives from reputable witnesses on a variety of strange events experienced there. Finally, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, by the late Harvard psychiatrist, John Mack, presents the testimonies of several people who under hypnosis, reported terrific abductions by aliens. Notwithstanding these and other many serious claims, one can understand why scientific orthodoxy has been quick to simply deny the occurrence of strange phenomena. In truth, a common denominator of all reported events is that it is practically impossible to make them happen on demand. Telepathy research, for example, may yield statistical correlations proving the phenomena is not random, but proving its existence on demand has been unfeasible. This makes conducting serious scientific research almost impossible. As a result, under scientific orthodoxy, all phenomena frequently mentioned as paranormal such as ghosts, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, life after death experiences, reincarnation, telekinesis, and others, can be explained away by either one of the following. That the claimed phenomenon simply does not exist. That some people experience it because of deception, hallucinations, charlatanry, or mistaken interpretations. If something passes the first test, meaning that the phenomena do in fact occur, that the reported event can be explained away by resorting to probability theory and particularly to the law of large numbers that states even the rarest occurrences are possible given the myriad of events in daily life that are bound to sometimes result in freakishly amazing coincidences. Some other phenomena, especially the ones related to matters of cognition such as claims of near-death experiences or alien abductions, are explained based on pure neurological basis. That is, the event is deemed to have been a delusion. Combining all the above, leaves science with nothing else to explain. Case closed, the scientific dogma rules. Except. Aren't we left with a nagging feeling there might be more to it? We believe that COCOON provides a framework that can possibly explain some of the various phenomena considered outside the realm of science. The goal is to evaluate whether we can turn metaphysics into physics and the paranormal into the new normal. Having a model that can be objectively analyzed and tested can turn the incomprehensible into the comprehended. If the COCOON model helps explain strange phenomena at least in part, we will hopefully be making progress by establishing hypotheses and scenarios that can then be further tested via experiment. At least we can say we tried. There is no reason why science has no problem spending millions of dollars trying to detect presumptive superstring particles or dark matter, events that are also presumably non-repeatable on demand, but won't consider experimental setups to test strange phenomena. We'll move now to consider some of the most typical strangeness cases against the COCOON model. Let's start with telepathy, since this is one of the most often claimed strange phenomena. The dictionary defines telepathy as the supposed communication of thoughts or ideas by means other than the known senses. Telepathy is a common feature of many a science fiction or mystical films, so examples of the phenomena exist aplenty. It's not surprising this phenomenon is probably the one that has been researched by science the most. Scientifically conducted testing using the so-called Ganzfeld experiments have produced correlations of 36%. If telepathy was not occurring, then we would expect results to approach 25% with the receiver guessing right 1 out of 4 times. Instead, the results are consistently 6 to 7% above chance. In other experiments, telepathy was tested with subjects in deep sleep. Results there were even more promising. As with other experiments, participants were placed in a soundproof dream lab also electromagnetically isolated. The sender would open a package with a randomly selected picture from a group of 8, to be transmitted to the receiver. In some cases, the sender and receiver were as far as 45 miles apart. According to biochemist Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, combining all 450 dream telepathy trials reported in scientific journals, the overall situation was positive and very significant statistically, with odds against results being due to chance, of 75 million to 1. In other words, telepathy might well be real. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Brian Josephson famously said, "Yes, I think telepathy exists, and I think quantum physics will help us understand its basic properties." Per COCOON, establishing a peer-to-peer direct quantum-enabled consciousness communication that simply traverses the information plane would seem trivial. Telepathic experiences that demand cognitive awareness in the material plane require the connection to traverse the microtubule gateway in both directions. The fact that telepathy is not a phenomenon that's easily replicated, may well be due to the noise and friction presented by the various elements to be crossed. So far as we know, positive correlations, when they occur, are not dependent on distance, and are not impeded by barriers that typically block other forms of signaling, such as Faraday cages for electromagnetism and acoustic isolations. As per COCOON, it could be presumed that telepathy would occur more easily and more frictionlessly between conscious entities having a strong CCX. This latter point may explain naturally occurring telepathic experiences between, say, two lovers separated by a long distance. Obviously, all humans share a common reality, and it is to be expected that we all have some degree of CCX entanglement with each other. But in principle, telepathy with strangers would be less reliable than telepathy with people who are closer to us. This explanation is consistent with findings that twins can experience more telepathic communications. The typical explanation that twin telepathy is due to the similar genetic links between twins producing similar brains that function similarly, fails to account for the fact that strong telepathic attachments are also found on fraternal twins, and even very close friends. COCOON also may explain why telepathic communications with people in a dream state are more productive. While sleeping or perhaps in a meditative state, the receiver will be less distracted by noise coming from the material senses. While there appears to be no telepathic dependency on distances, given our suggestion that communications take place across the information plane, entities in direct contact or sharing a common local environment may be able to quickly increase their CCX to allow for telepathic exchanges to occur, even if they had previously been strangers. Still, it is presumed that entities with a strong CCX such as loved ones can establish telepathic contact with lesser friction and across any distances. The fact that telepathy is not a phenomenon that can be reproduced at will is an issue. What is needed is a better understanding of the variables leading to more reproducible tests. Hopefully COCOON can point the way to future experiments. For example, it would be good to test telepathy with twins who grew apart and compare those results with twins who have been always together. Before continuing, let's take a quick detour to discuss a somewhat disturbing feature arising from the COCOON model. If telepathy is equivalent to two people exchanging email messages, what can prevent a conscious entity acting like the snooper who listens to your unencrypted public Wi-Fi connection at Starbucks? The snooper may not be taking control of your device but can still view the information you are receiving, by tapping into the Wi-Fi signals, even if you did not explicitly provide him with permissions. There is every reason to believe that high CCXs could open the door to similar potential hackings. Now, since COCOON establishes that consciousness is a coherent, self-contained, and non-clonable entity, it also implies that hacking the actual conscious entity is not possible. However, someone hacking the interactions between the conscious entity and the physical brain is another story. Perhaps the best way to explain how this could happen is by describing one of the most common scamming situations these days. You get a voice message from an alleged agent from any well-known company, whether they claim to be from Amazon or Microsoft, or Apple makes no difference. In the message they indicate they have charged you for, say, $350 for a purchase you never made, and to call them if you think the charge is erroneous. Naively, you call them back to challenge the charge. The scammer, working from a well-organized overseas call center, is not only well-versed with social engineering, but follows a script to convince you he means well and will resolve the problem quickly. Next, he tells you that to get your money back you must download one of the many remote desktop software available from the internet. As you follow these steps, you end up launching an application that effectively allows the scammer to view and control your computer remotely. It is not that the scammer has hacked you, personally. The scammer is not hacking your brain. What the scammer has achieved is to insert himself in the middle of your computer-to-brain interactions. The scammer can now see not only what you are viewing on the screen. Worse, the scammer could, in principle, execute any command on your computer remotely. Of course, if the hacker were to attempt to execute something, you could notice something was not right and would proceed to quickly disconnect the remote software. The scammers know this, and so, instead of directly trying to manipulate your computer, they trick you by discreetly altering the information being presented to you, so that, in the end, you are deceived into doing their bidding yourself. They will then ask you to fill in a request for credit form, and to enter the amount you are presumably asking to get credited for. Except that, as you type the $350 number, they surreptitiously add 2 zeros to the amount. Remember, they have control of your computer, so they can do this. Next, they accuse you of having caused a credit of $35,000 from their account instead of the agreed-upon $350. They put an act and furiously demand that you log into your bank account. Feeling guilty by the terrible mistake, you sheepishly comply. Next, the hacker blanks the bank response for just long enough to allow him to modify the bank report in your browser. The bank's account balance sheet now shows a fake transfer of $35,000 took place from their bank account to yours. The transfer never really occurred, of course, but they are tricking you into believing that it did, simply by quietly modifying the information presented by the browser. You know what comes next. They demand you pay them back the $35,000 minus the $350 of the original refund. Amazingly, many people fall for this scam, and unfortunately most scam victims are elder people basically being robbed of their retirement money. But I digress. This analogy is meant to show how, not unlike a hacker, being able to control your computer with remote desktop software, a high CCX may open the door for some other entity in the information plane to not only watch or track everything you are experiencing, but even to modify your perceptions of reality by feeding you bogus information. Now, don't assume this is always nefarious. The original reason for remote desktop software was a benign one, to allow bona fide technical support people to remotely fix issues with your computer. It's just that the feature, like many other features, can sometimes be used for malicious purposes as well. As per COCOON, the hacking entity would need to have a strong CCX with the target to pull this off. It is possible that strong shared experiences may create a stronger CCX entanglement. Here we define strong as novel, spectacular, tragic, or unusual, as those events tend to generate more information, and are observed by many. Major events witnessed by most of us in the material plane are probably good sources of CCX-making experiences for presumptive hacking entities, but there may be events more narrowly focused to small groups or even individuals. Now that we have explained hacking, we can talk about remote viewing. This phenomenon gained notoriety upon the 2004 release of the movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, and the 2017 FOIA documents disclosure of the CIA's government programs researching remote viewing under a host of code names, with Stargate being the most recognizable. Remote viewing has been defined as the ability to describe locations of which one has no prior knowledge, and as the act of seeing or sensing something without physically being there to experience it. Extended claims are that remote viewers can perceive in the present, past, and future. Obviously, this purported capability was deemed to have tremendous potential utility for the intelligence community. According to the CIA documentation, programs involving basic research, operations, and foreign assessment were put in place from the beginning of the decade of the 70s. In the typical remote viewing experiment, a remote viewer was asked to visualize a place, location, or object in a given target. One of the major claimed successes was when a viewer gave a stunning description of a Chinese atomic bomb test, 3 days before it happened, with only the geographic coordinates for guidance. Another one was a viewer pointing at a map of Africa with the location of a downed Russian Tupolev Tu-22 bomber that U.S. satellites had been unable to find. Former President Jimmy Carter confirmed this event in a speech to Emory College students in September 1995 when saying, "American spy satellites failed to locate any sign of the wreckage. It was without my knowledge that the head of the CIA turned to a woman reputed to have psychic powers." Carter also commented that the remote viewer gave some latitude and longitude figures. We focused our satellite cameras on that point and the lost plane was there. The program was ultimately shut down because despite some successes, and the fact that there were actual statistical effects, the typical results were very unpredictable. As concluded, the information provided by remote viewing was vague and ambiguous, making it difficult, if not impossible, for the technique to give information of sufficient quality and accuracy for actionable intelligence. Nevertheless, some form of the phenomena appears to be real. Unlike with telepathic exchanges, remote viewing does not involve two-way communications. Instead, the phenomenon is more akin to leveraging another sensory input via remote means. COCOON can explain these along the lines of remote organism hacking, discussed earlier, and as shown in the picture. It is possible that the remote viewer gained access to the perception machinery of an organism in the target site. Such hacking could be more easily achieved on lower life forms such as birds, since it is more likely that lower-level organisms would have less resistance against the hacking, given their less developed cognitive layers. Remote viewers would be extracting information via a direct, raw sensory route without the need to tunnel through the several layers of cognitive and information processing present in human brains. Having said this, some degree of CCX between the viewer and the proxy viewer organism would be required for the remote viewer to access the proxy. Even though all living creatures are entangled to some degree by virtue of sharing the same earthly environment, much of such entanglements would be somewhat feeble, perhaps explaining why the totality of results was so unreliable. Also, it is not clear how remote viewing could map generic coordinates or codes to a specific geospatial location in the material plane. Frankly, COCOON does not offer a solution for this type of geolocalization. More extreme alleged remote viewings of the dark side of the Moon, or the rings of Saturn, or Jupiter have been made. As per our explanation, these would require access into conscious entities outside Earth. This is in principle hard to fathom, but pursuant to our intention to keep an open mind, this is a topic for a later discussion. The claimed ability of viewing into the past could be explained by the viewers accessing the information repository in the information plane. On the other hand, viewing into the future is not supported, given COCOON's assertion that the future does not yet exist. Still, COCOON may have room for a limited ability to predict events in the short-term future. To predict something is not the same as to prophesy. Predictions are more about forecasting a future event based on our understanding of the current state of the system. For example, the meteorologist may predict or forecast, it will rain later in the week, based on the weather radar information and atmospheric simulations. COCOON is predicated on the idea that quantum wave function collapses generate information that then gets transferred to the information plane, with successive quantum collapses representing the march of time. Because the probabilistic nature of each quantum collapse, trying to predict the long-term future becomes less and less reliable. With quantum collapses taking on a specific value after each observation, the wave function resets and takes a new probabilistic superposition state, in line with the latest collapsed values. The figure shows a series of collapses. At t0, we could predict an A outcome will most likely occur, since the probability for this outcome is higher than for B or C. And indeed, after the collapse at t1, the A value is materialized. The new wave function now presents a new set of possible values. B has now a higher probability, and there is a new potential outcome, D, that was not present in the original vector of probabilities. This time, at time t2, value D materializes, even though it had only a probability of 25%. No one would have been able to predict this outcome while at t0, since state D was not even in the menu then. The same occurs for E materializing at time t3. While short-term predictions may be explainable, predictions of the long-term future are simply not supported. The future does not yet exist. Nostradamus was not in the right business, after all. The subject of near-death experiences or NDEs has gained more attention as advances on medical resuscitation techniques become more widely used. The common experience from people who were diagnosed as being clinically deaf for a period of time is that of entering a tunnel towards a bright light, while having a sense of overwhelming well-being, permeated by an intense feeling of love. The experience is often accompanied by the welcoming guidance of now-deceased loved ones such as spouses, parents, siblings, and other relatives and friends, and with life reviews. This basic narrative represents core experiences, which are sometimes colored by cultural factors or may include some minor variations. There is a smaller percentage of reported experiences deemed to be of a darker nature, but unlike the common positive archetype, negative experiences do not necessarily have clear common denominators. It has been noted by neuroscientists that the NDE experience shares many similarities with other mind-altering states, such as those caused by hallucinogens, sensory deprivation chambers, and meditation. The traditional explanation is that all those experiences are the result of chaotic changes in the brain chemistry because of the act of dying, or substances such as psilocybin affecting the release of endorphins such as dopamine, serotonin, and melatonin. Especially, feelings of oneness with God, along with a strong sense of being in an alternate reality, share much in common with NDEs, even if, unlike NDEs, most other transcendental experiences do not include contact with loving relatives who have passed away, or life reviews. From a cocoon perspective, the transcendental experiences from near death are likely due to our consciousness placing more focus on the input coming from the information plane than on the one coming from the material plane. The left figure shows the steady state of our existence. Here, the inner eye of consciousness is mostly focused on capturing the stream of material world experiences. Since it makes sense for evolution to favor those who are more attuned to scanning and reacting to physical challenges, most of us live our lives with a strong focus on the experiences emanating from the material plane as the default existential mode. This is also in keeping with one of consciousness' role as a gateway transferring information from the material to the information plane. The right figure shows a scenario whereby consciousness attention shifts toward the information plane. Clearly, the process of dying will involve a decoupling from the material plane. COCOON specifically suggests the decoupling starts when the microtubules start to decohere. This is consistent with experiments showing that anesthesia works by temporarily suppressing microtubular activities. When microtubules start to decohere, consciousness then has no remedy but to shift its attention to the information plane. Assuming a non-catastrophic trauma, with microtubules decohering gradually, near-death experiences in the information plane may still have a chance to be recorded back to the brain via extant microtubules, and from there to brain-based memories. This is not necessarily the case with anesthetized people because anesthetics quickly inactivate the microtubules. Any experience consciousness may have in the information plane during anesthesia is thus unlikely to get recorded by the brain's cognitive areas. Even then, occasionally, patients have reported exceptionally clear consciousness under general anesthesia, including lucid thoughts, memories, emotions, and verifiable perceptions from a position outside and above their unconscious body despite the total absence of demonstrable brain activity. Incidentally, during our dreaming stage, both inner eyes may be in a balance. As suggested by COCOON, it is during dreaming that our cognitive processes catch up with the day's experiences by further transferring cognitive summaries of the day's experiences to the information plane via the microtubular gateway. During dreaming stages, consciousness can receive information from the information plane that can then be implanted into our brain's cognition system, even if with a loss of fidelity. In computer terms, dreaming may be serving as a data or information cleansing and housekeeping process intended to better synchronize the material and information plane experiences. Shared life experiences generate duplicate information with each instance representing the individual perspective of the experiencer. From a quantum perspective, all shared experiences produce added entanglements between the conscious entities sharing the experience. Since we normally share most of our lives with those we love, such as our parents, or spouses, and our children, it is to be expected that our entanglement with those entities is much stronger than that for strangers. As per COCOON, all experiences are stored in the information plane, not unlike the way a blockchain grows, and that entanglement between the various consciousness entities survives the detachment of a conscious entity upon death. The higher CCX between an entity going through an NDE, and one already detached, the more likely the detached conscious entity will make an appearance during the NDE. As NDE experiencers eventually come back to life, the microtubular structure would recover, with some of the NDE experiences becoming imprinted back into the cognitive storage. Descriptions of NDEs can vary according to cultural constructs and contexts. What a detaching consciousness may experience will vary on the specifics, but most importantly, the memory of the experience captured in the cognitive store of the brain will surely suffer infidelity. Raw experiences from the information plane during an NDE could become a torrent of information that may not be easily representable by our brain's neural machinery. Imagine trying to cram a mainframe-level database into a puny smartphone. Archetypes and metaphors need to be created for the cognitive system to map the essence of the experiences. It is to be expected that these mappings will be biased with cultural or personally created frameworks. In the end, what might be remembered is not necessarily the exact NDE details but instead a representational essence that makes those memories consistent with the brain's cognitive system interpretational capabilities. Despite culturally driven differences, there remains an area of commonality. Even among children, the degree of commonality suggests the experience is not necessarily driven by prior beliefs, but that the differences arise from the way the experience is learned and verbalized by the experiencer. It is interesting to speculate that religions give people a unifying NDE framework. Attending the same masses and rituals not only strengthens their CCX on a communal basis, but religious beliefs can be mapped into mental archetypes that might serve as a common language when describing the experience. Catholics, for example, may refer to entities encountered during the experience as angels, while those from a different religion would use a different description. Finally, it's been frequently argued that dreams are the way in which our deceased loved ones communicate with us. This is feasible because the COCOON framework allows shared attention to the information and material planes during dreaming. This opens the gate for our loved ones' conscious entities to be able to communicate with our consciousness via the information plane, even if they are detached, non-sentient entities. This raises the following question: what happens if there is no return? What if the NDE is really a death experience? What happens in the afterlife? Thanks to the relentless march of entropy in the material plane, all biological lifeforms must eventually die. The conscious entities must detach from the organism's microtubules and, unlike with NDEs, this time they must become a standalone entity in the information plane. Note that we are not being hyperbolic when we use the term detach. Full detachment of the conscious entity occurs when the organism dies. There's no loss of 21 grams, since the conscious entity was never part of the material plane to begin with. What happens is that, during detachment, all quantum entanglements between the conscious entity and the organism's microtubules are severed. The detached entity then becomes free to roam in the information plane. For as long as there is a strong net CCX entanglement with entities still attached to the material plane, the detached entity may continue to interact with those still attached entities in a non-sentient way. These interactions are primarily manifested as emotions, or abstract feelings between conscious entity to conscious entity via the information plane. On some occasions, a friendly form of hacking may allow a loved one's detached entity to witness the physical experiences of an attached entity. Loved ones who preceded you will hang around you in one way or another for as long as you are alive. This is something we should all find most comforting. Even so, eventually, all strongly linked entities will also become detached from the material world. A generation has passed. At that point, the CCX of all detached entities with the material world will go below a certain threshold, freeing them to seek a brand new material attachment. Consciousnesses have a job to do, after all. By now, you would have noticed that we are referring to the process typically known as reincarnation, and which, under COCOON, it is more about material reattachment. While the record of experiences for the detached entities is preserved in the information plane, the conscious entity can now attach to a newly born organism with a clean memory slate. In any case, even if the newly attached biological entity holds no memories yet, the reattached conscious entity never loses its index of links to memories from previous attachments. This index is actually a universally unique identifier built from the accumulation of past life experiences, and it properly serves to define the concept of what is a soul. A soul is then the association of a conscious entity with its unique history. Again, given quantum physics' non-cloning theorem, we can affirm that every soul is cosmically unique. No two souls are alike. It is theoretically possible for some individuals to be able to access past life events stored in the information plane either naturally or under altered states such as hypnosis. And there is indeed a wealth of anecdotal information about individuals being able to accurately remember past lives. As far as we know, there are not too many claims of people saying they remember past lives in extraterrestrial settings. If conscious entities could reincarnate or reattach into any other alien lifeforms, we would expect to hear more of such claims. Indeed, the most credible past live memories usually refer to past experiences, here, on Earth. It would appear there must be a minimum of CCX stickiness to facilitate the reattachment of a conscious entity with a material environment via microtubules. A conscious entity who has lived as a human would not be able to easily correlate its experiences in an alien framework. Also, while our consciousness may have started as a proto-consciousness in a single cell, it would make sense that consciousnesses have co-evolved in complexity along with biological evolution. This makes more sense when we realize that the information channeling role that consciousnesses must be capable to perform must accommodate the information generation characteristics of the biological organism. It would not be optimal for a conscious entity to reattach with lower biological forms. Chances that you will be reincarnated as a butterfly are slim to none. Any change, either toward more complexity or even a regressionist one, would have to occur in small steps. This might also be a consideration on why it is not feasible for a consciousness to be effectively attached with a completely alien organism. We can now move to a discussion on the UAP or UFO phenomena. We left this for last, because many of its strangest features may include telepathy, remote viewing, and hacking. In his book, Passport to Magonia, Jacques Vallée brought forth the evolving consensus that UFO phenomena might not just be a physical one but was instead one that could be correlated with what most typically term as mystical or metaphysical. He states that the modern global belief in flying saucers and their occupants is identical to an earlier belief in the fairy faith, and that entities described as the pilots of the craft are indistinguishable from the elves, sylphs, and lutins of the Middle Ages. Together with Eric Davis, more recently he wrote, "Everything works as if UAPs were the product of a technology that integrates physical and psychic phenomena and primarily affects cultural variables in our society through manipulation of physiological and psychological parameters in the witnesses." Vallée and Davis went on to suggest a 6-layer anomalous phenomena model. The first layer is the physical one, consistent with a technology centered on a craft that appears to be using a revolutionary propulsion system. In this case, the object occupies a position in space, moves as time passes, leaves indentations and burns, it is detected by radar, and gives rise to photographic images. In the second pseudophysical layer, objects appear physically but perform unlikely transformations such as becoming transparent, doubling, or splitting, becoming fuzzy, and becoming not detectable by radar. The third layer is psychological, which includes observations that cannot be corroborated by others. In many ways, alien abductions fit this category. The fourth layer relates to physiological experiences that include buzzing sounds, partial paralysis, burns, tickling sensations, nausea, etc. The fifth layer is the psychic one. This involves phenomena typically ascribed to parapsychology such as UAPs appearing to anticipate witnesses' intentions, poltergeist, premonitory dreams or illusions, and levitation. Finally, Layer 6 is cultural, which deals with society's reactions to the various strange phenomena reports, and the way in which hoaxes, fiction and science fiction imagery becomes generated. This is more related to the field of sociology and the manner in which memes and conspiracy theories propagate. While Layer 6 is outside our scope, COCOON can provide some explanation for the physiological and psychic layers. As you may recall, the COCOON model allows the existence of hacking features that would enable a distinct conscious entity to present distorted sensory information to the hacked entity. Some physiological, and psychic experiences may be partially explained, if the hacking entity is sophisticated enough, and if there is a strong CCX entanglement between the hacker and the target. It is conceivable for the hacking entity to implant hallucinations, or false experiences and memories into the target's mind. Alien abductions might be also explained this way, except for cases where witnesses of associated physical phenomena exist. Without doubt, Layers 1 and 2 must be explained in terms of physical or pseudophysical UAP appearances. These layers also demand an exploration of possible alien presence in our planet. Reports on UAPs have gained in credibility thanks to the release of U.S. Navy videos showing so-called tic-tac and gimbal crafts. Government agencies summarized 5 observables shown by this unexplained craft, and which help refute the idea that this technology comes from American black projects or from other nations. First, the objects are capable of what appears to be anti-gravity lifts with no apparent means of propulsion. Secondly, they display sudden and instantaneous accelerations. The third observable is that they can reach hypersonic speeds without leaving behind any trails and without triggering sonic booms. Their fourth characteristic is that they appear to have low observability or cloaking. Even when the objects are clearly observed, getting a clear view or detection is haphazard. They often appear blurred, or are surrounded by a haze around them, when photographed. The fifth observable relates to their transmedium capabilities. That is their ability to perform effortlessly on air, in space, or underwater. What makes these objects even more intriguing is their sheer diversity and apparently contradictory nature. On the one side, we have what's supposed to be super sophisticated technology, but on the other hand, they appear to crash often, due to foolishly clumsy reasons such as getting hit by a light bolt, crashing with small airplanes, crashing with power towers, crashing with each other, and so on. Do they want to be seen or not? Sometimes, they put out a show with extraordinary maneuvers for no apparent reason before just fading away. On occasions, they have been spotted as they fail miserably to masquerade as clouds or planes. But then why do they sport bright lights, if they do not want to be seen? Perhaps more nefariously, there are credible reports of UFOs interfering with ballistic nuclear sites, but even then, their behavior is not consistent. They have disabled nuclear launch systems in the US, but activated nuclear launching sequences like they did in Russia. And there appear to be more UFO models than Liberace customs. Shapes comes in a variety that includes super-large triangular craft like the one spotted over Phoenix, or the prototypical disc-shaped flying saucers in a variety of sizes and proportions, and the aforementioned tic-tac-shaped UFOs, which in the 50s were referred as cigar-shaped. Smoking was more of a thing back then. Some are said to be pyramid-shaped, cubical, or egg-shaped, not to mention the ones that show in the form of various spherical lights. And then, while some of the sightings are witnessed by many people, but not detected by radars, others are detected by radars or by infrared but are not visible to the naked eye. Indeed, many UFO investigators mention certain trickster element to the phenomena. Being facetious here, but maybe aliens have a sense of humor, and maybe we just don't find it funny, 'cause the humor is too alien? And, in any case, are we even sure we must be talking about aliens? The traditional UFO archetype came from Hollywood narratives depicting extraterrestrial civilizations encountering each other via interstellar travel. Films like Star Trek and Star Wars depict civilizations coming into contact via space travel. The problem with this view is that the universe is so large that travel would take too much time, even if resorting to fictional warp speeds. Back in 1961, astronomer Frank Drake proposed an equation to help estimate the potential number of advanced civilizations in our galaxy. The equation is based on a series of guesstimates, such as, how many suns like ours are there? How many of those suns have planets? How many of those may be inhabitable? And so on. Even though in our galaxy alone, there are estimated 100 billion stars, the range of results quickly diminishes as we plug in the various assumptions. In most typical calculations, the Drake equation yields somewhere between just 40 to over a million estimated civilizations in our Milky Way. This wide range is indicative of how uncertain are the estimations. Still, assuming a uniform random distribution of civilizations in the galaxy, those estimates give a possible average distance between civilizations of something between 10,000 light-years to 100 light-years. Even if we were to assume travel at the speed of light, and that aliens may have longer lifespans, these distances seem far too large to support back and forth travel between them. But are we sure we cannot travel faster than light? Interestingly, Mexican physicist Miguel Alcubierre found a theoretical solution to Einstein's general theory of relativity, which allows for travel faster than the speed of light. In his case, a warp drive using a tremendous amount of negative energy could create a surrounding space bubble, with the bubble itself moving at speeds faster than light, and the craft inside hardly having to move within the bubble. Einstein's theory does not preclude space itself moving at speeds faster than light, after all. The problem is that, as far as we know, there is no such a thing as negative energy in the universe. Still, more recent analyses suggested that it is possible to travel at speeds just below the speed of light by using normal positive energy. Again, the problem is that a warp drive engine traveling at half the speed of light would require something like the energy equivalent of the entire planet Jupiter. That's more energy than what's needed to fill the tank of gas of a large SUV, in case you were wondering. Even if a civilization became advanced enough to garner the energy from an entire planet, there is no reason to believe that economic laws would not apply. Even if theoretically possible, such kind of travel would be very expensive, and be, at best, very rare. Because of this, alternative explanations to UAPs coming from other planets have been suggested. A popular one is that UAPs are humans from the future. But, even setting aside the many paradoxes raised by time travel, in COCOON the past is gone, and the future does not yet exist, so UAPs cannot be time travelers. Others speculate UAPs are from another Earth civilization hidden underground or under the oceans, except it is hard to imagine how a technology like UAPs could be developed under these conditions. True, perhaps dolphins are even smarter than humans, but no one would expect them to create a civilization in the middle of the ocean. Another suggestion is that UAPs come from another dimension or from alternate universes. With COCOON we established there is only one universe consisting of a material and an information plane. No additional dimensions need to apply. In COCOON, the information plane does not have any materiality, so UAPs cannot exist there. Also, even if they were multiple universes, it's hard to see how they would bridge the gap to influence one another. No. Aliens are not likely to come from other parallel universes. Finally, the religiously inclined argue that UAPs are angelical and/or demonic entities, while the skeptically inclined still dismiss them as just being hallucinations, something not real, or something that will be explained via some yet unknown natural phenomena. Either way, it has been firmly established that at least some UAPs have a real physical or pseudo-physical presence and are therefore not imaginary. How can we reconcile all these facts? Our view is that even if the tremendous expanse of the physical universe makes it unlikely that aliens could be conducting frequent visitations on our planet, it is not unreasonable to think that over thousands of years we would have been visited by at least one such civilization. To better explain this, we should perhaps draw lessons from history, and consider when the Europeans came to America. Soon after the discovery of the Americas, explorations deeper into the new continent quickly followed. Since back-and-forth travel would have been costly and inefficient, sea journeys across the Atlantic in that era were fraught with danger and took over 1 month. The Europeans set out to establish colonies in the new land. Living off the land meant that they had to recreate their technology independently from their homelands. Famously, Hernando Cortés was able to conquer Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital in what's now Mexico City, by ordering the construction of ships with labor assistance from allied native tribes, and the use of local woods and materials. Their ships' deployment around Lake Texcoco to siege the city, along with the help provided by a smallpox plague, were sufficient to devastate the defenders and cause the fall of the mighty Aztec Empire. Interstellar travel might be expensive and difficult, but if the traveling crew is willing and able to live off the land once they reach their destination, the only problem to solve would be how to maintain communications with the homeland. So, let's imagine this fictional scenario. A 10,000-year-old civilization inhabiting TRAPPIST-1e, the fifth and most Earth-like planet of 7 planets in the TRAPPIST-1 system, located only 39.46 years from Earth, launches their super-advanced version of the Webb telescope, which quickly detects signs of life from Earth. Excited about the discovery, they decide to send a mission of exploration. This is like our moonshot program, and so they raise taxes and issue bonds to finance the venture. Since they have already mastered technology like the Alcubierre drive, they are able to travel at speeds 1/3 the speed of light. At that speed, they will reach Earth in 118 years for TRAPPIST, but only 64 years for the crew, due to relativistic time dilation. Since the life expectancy of the Trappistans is 120 years, it's clear that this mission is a one-way ticket of no return. Despite this, they get 300 volunteers for the mission, 100 from each of their 3 genders. The Trappist sexual life is too complicated to get into it at this time. For good measure, they freeze and store a number of fertilized eggs. Since their plan is to live off the land, they also carry seeds and substances to grow and manufacture their own food once they deplete their initial supplies. Their cargo also consists of tools and those rare materials needed to quickly recreate their technology while abroad. To support the crew, they also man the ship with hundreds of biologically engineered robots, affectionately referred to as EBEs. They will not have to rely on electromagnetic communications during their mission. This means of communication is too slow, as it is limited by the speed of light. Luckily, Trappistans have mastered the art of telepathy via the information plane. They have ensured the travelers have developed strong CCX links with the home people so as to make those communications occur as frictionlessly as possible. Upon their arrival, they encounter a budding agrarian human civilization near a major river on the north side of a large continental mass. They discreetly observe them make several failed attempts at building some pyramidal buildings, which keep collapsing. What would happen next would be more the stuff of science fiction. But hey, we are already in speculation land, right? While European colonization of the Americas was driven by the greedy search for treasures, and the exploitation of resources, it would be pretentious to ascribe those objectives to any visiting extraterrestrial civilization. We can only conjecture about their ultimate goals, but at a minimum we can assume they would be driven by the need to gain more information on us and about Earth. Obviously, they will also want to keep contact with their home planet to communicate as much of their findings as possible. In our story, the communication bandwidth to the Trappist planet would be 300 telepathic streams to home. Given the amount of data to be gathered, this is not enough. What about recruiting humans to serve as monitoring and communication devices too? This would require establishing CCX entanglements between selected humans and those back home. How could this be done? This figure shows a speculative mechanism. Since the visitors already have a link CCX0 with their homeland, they can communicate home telepathically. But as mentioned, it is in the best interest of the aliens to broaden the CCX bandwidth with as many channels as possible. So, they make an appearance before the humans, who might see them as gods. There are plenty of religious narratives in human history that speak of humans interacting with various powerful divinities. For example, there is an Egyptian deity named Adam, a name derived from a verb which means to complete or to finish. For our purposes, this first contact between the visitors and the humans represents a shared experience that would increase the CCX1 link between the two peoples. Assuming a tuna opens its senses to hacking by the home planet people would also be able to witness his shared experiences with humans. A CCX2 entanglements between Trappist inhabitants and humans would then be created. Even if weak, this CCX2 entanglement might be enough to allow the distant aliens to perform direct remote viewing through linked humans. What's left now is to create as many shared experiences as possible, to further strengthen and expand the CCX links between humans and aliens. Except, we are talking about a period where nothing much exciting was taking place, and human population was less dense. What better way to establish a shared point of focus than to induce hundreds of thousands of humans to build a structure so magnificent as to attract everyone's attention? After giving humans a few pointers to build better large structures, they could have just shared the experience of the multi-year process of building and then witnessing a referential convergence point such as a large pyramid. Same would apply for other Earth cultures. Obviously, since both humans and aliens are not immortal, this process would need to be maintained across generations. Frozen Trappists' eggs would eventually be born and require renewed CCX entanglements. So, as part of supporting the 6-layer model for anomalous phenomena, COCOON can accommodate the premise that aliens and their technologies could in fact be materially present in our planet, and have been here for a long time. If so, alien presence on Earth could have started thousands of years ago, and probably predates the origins of civilization and our written records. Supporting this thesis is the French government's disclosure document Cometa, that mentions in Chapter 13 of their study that the UFO phenomenon is of extreme antiquity such that, quote, pre-industrial civilizations of Earth were shaped by it on a level that includes fundamental religious beliefs, so that a full disclosure and comprehensive public understanding of the phenomenon might lead to the collapse of religious belief systems and to consequently catastrophic socio-political upheaval. End quote. Save for the mothership that took the seeding crews of alien civilizations to Earth and which may be parked in hidden nearby places such as the asteroid belt, most material UAP craft could have been manufactured on Earth. This might explain the paradoxical fact that craft developed by very advanced civilizations would sometimes tend to crash a little too often, is perhaps due to those UFOs being manufactured under terrestrial constraints. This scenario also offers a realistic explanation for the zoo-like variety of UAP craft, as it allows for craft being designed and manufactured for specific local purposes. This possibility aligns with Jacques Vallée's comment regarding items allegedly retrieved from crashed alien crafts, stating that while none of these materials are extraterrestrial in elemental composition, in some of these samples, the isotopic ratios of magnesium have been artificially altered. While some of the reported UFO phenomena is the result of observing actual material crafts, there is plenty of reported phenomena that can be explained by other methods such as holographic projections, or even induced hallucinations. But all this might just be a side effect of many of us being hacked to serve as something akin to Ring cameras on behalf of the aliens. Whether this form of non-intrusive hacking is harmful or not, is open to question. As for abductions, it is possible that some aliens have undertaken the effort to genetically manipulate the human DNA, and probably the DNA of some animals for their own purposes. Even if with modern society we no longer need pyramids to strengthen CCXs, depending on your viewpoint we enjoy or suffer plenty of globally shared experiences. This is more so with the advent of global communications and social media. The need to keep strengthening CCX connections via shared observations may well explain why some UFO/UAP events are notable by their appearance. As a matter of fact, religious phenomena could have been orchestrated for this purpose. The apparition of the Virgin of Fatima in Portugal on October 13, 1917 before 70,000 witnesses claiming the sun trembled, making sudden incredible movements outside all cosmic laws as if it were dancing, while the atmosphere took into strange colors is but one pre-modern example. Hopefully these possible explanations will open the field for further research. To the extent that we succeeded, the Strangeness heat map would have turned a bit greener. Of course, there are other phenomena that COCOON has not directly explained. For example, COCOON does not allow for the information plane's free-roaming entities to directly influence events in the material plane. Also, COCOON does not propose to violate the principle of sufficient reason. This principle stipulates that everything must have a reason, cause, or ground. Reported poltergeist, telekinesis, or psychokinesis phenomena violate COCOON's postulate that actions of conscious entities in the material plane must occur via commands delivered through microtubules. Even if it were possible that the information plane could directly influence some spacetime events, those influences could induce lower entropy with no information extractions, thus violating material plane physical laws. In consequence, other explanations are needed for poltergeist, if in fact this phenomenon is real. As for cryptids, these may be explained via other means. Claims for the existence of Bigfoot or Loch Ness are probably easier to explain than claims for wolfmen or other uninvited monsters. As per reported phenomena from Skinwalker Ranch, it is possible that some of those more unconventional cryptid appearances may be caused or induced by UAPs as implanted hallucinations. We are also terribly curious why aliens would do such a thing as cattle mutilations. Perhaps these are part of the aliens' genetic research efforts intended to simplify the generation of CCX entanglements. All these topics are extremely exciting, and we could continue talking more about them, along with additional details and supporting research. Perhaps in some future videos. But first, we plan to have a follow-up video attempting to answer these questions. How could the COCOON framework come about? In other words, is there a feasible path for the universe to come into being with biplanar information and material characteristics? While the standard cosmological model tells us there was a Big Bang, inflation, and then matter and energy evolving into our current universe, we will discuss some variations to this cosmology. These variations may help explain the cocoon model by suggesting answers to the following. What is the nature of the information plane? What are conscious entities made of? Is there a commonality in the fabric of the material and information planes? Regardless of how we might explain things, even esoteric things, some questions will always remain. Why existence? Is there a God? Is there a purpose to it all? Will the universe come to an end? Another subsequent video will discuss these and other questions. In the meantime, thanks for watching. If your conscious entity so decides, please feel free to like or subscribe. Bye for now.